The advertisement in the Oregon City Sentinel seemed desperate enough that Felicity Townsend nearly passed it by, thinking surely no respectable woman would answer such a plea. But her own circumstances had grown equally desperate in the spring of 1878. She sat in the cramped boarding house room she could barely afford, the newspaper trembling slightly in her hands as she read the words again. Wanted. Woman of good character to serve as companion and caretaker for young girl on cattle ranch. Room and board provided. Inquire at Winston Ranch, 10 miles west of Oregon City. The simplicity of it struck her as almost brutally honest. No flowery language about seeking a refined lady or promising luxurious accommodations. Just the bare facts, much like the man who had likely written it. Felicity folded the newspaper carefully and set it on the small table beside her bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Henderson arguing with another tenant about late rent, and the familiar knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Her teaching position had ended when the school board decided they needed a man for the job instead. Never mind that her students had shown marked improvement under her instruction. The small savings she had accumulated were nearly gone, and respectable employment for single women remained scarce in the growing frontier town. She was 24 years old, educated, and utterly alone in the world since her father's death 6 months prior. Her mother had passed when Felicity was just a child, leaving her to be raised by a father who believed women deserved the same education as men. A radical notion that had served her well in some ways and poorly in others. She could quote Shakespeare and calculate figures with ease, but she had no family connections, no prospects for marriage, and now no means of supporting herself. The next morning, Felicity borrowed Mrs. Henderson's buggy, promising to return it by evening, and set out westward from Oregon City. The road was rutted and rough, winding through stands of pine and Douglas fir that towered overhead, their branches creating patches of cool shadow across her path. Oregon spring was in full display, with wildflowers dotting the meadows and the distant mountains still crowned with snow. She had dressed in her most practical dress, a deep blue cotton that had seen better days but was clean and neatly mended, and pinned her auburn hair into a simple bun at the nape of her neck. The Winston Ranch announced itself with a weathered wooden arch over the main entrance road, the name branded into the crossbeam. Felicity guided the horse down the drive, her heart beating faster with each turn of the wheels. The ranch house came into view first, a solid 2-story structure built from rough-hewn logs with a wide porch wrapping around the front. It was larger than she had expected, speaking to some degree of prosperity, though the paint was peeling and the yard had a somewhat neglected appearance. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a massive barn, a chicken coop, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse for ranch hands. Cattle grazed in the distant pastures, and she could see several men working near the corral, their attention focused on a large black horse that seemed determined to throw its rider. She brought the buggy to a stop near the house and climbed down, smoothing her skirts and trying to calm her nerves. Before she could even approach the porch, the front door opened and a man stepped out, and Felicity felt her breath catch unexpectedly. Yates Barlow was not what she had anticipated. She had pictured someone older, perhaps weathered and worn down by whatever circumstances had led him to place that advertisement. Instead, the man who stood before her appeared to be in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair that curled slightly over his collar. His face was handsome in a rugged way, all strong angles and sun-bronzed skin, but it was his eyes that struck her most, a striking blue-gray that held a weariness far beyond his years. "Help you, miss?" His voice was deep, cautious, as he descended the porch steps. "I am here about the advertisement," Felicity said, lifting her chin slightly. "In the Sentinel, regarding the position." Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, or maybe disappointment. He looked her up and down, not in an improper way, but as if assessing whether she would be suitable for hard ranch life. "You are responding to work, not asking for directions." "I am quite serious, Mr. Barlow, I presume?" At his nod, she continued, "I am Felicity Townsend. I was a schoolteacher in Oregon City until recently, and I have experience caring for children. I am healthy, capable, and in need of employment. Your advertisement suggested you have a daughter requiring care." Yates Barlow removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in what appeared to be a habitual gesture of frustration or thought. "Miss Townsend, I appreciate you coming all this way, but I should be clear about the situation. My daughter, Emma, she is 7 years old and she has not spoken a single word since her mother died 2 years ago. The doctor says there is nothing physically wrong with her, but she is selective mute or some such term. She needs someone patient, someone who will not give up on her." The pain in his voice when he mentioned his wife was palpable, and Felicity felt an unexpected surge of sympathy. "I understand loss, Mr. Barlow. My own father passed away not long ago and my mother when I was young. Sometimes grief steals our words because no words seem adequate for what we feel." He studied her more carefully then, truly looking at her rather than merely assessing her suitability. "Would you like to meet her? Emma, I mean. She is the one who needs to feel comfortable with you." Felicity nodded, and Yates led her into the house. The interior was clean but sparse, clearly lacking a woman's touch in its purely functional arrangement. The furniture was sturdy and well made but positioned without any thought to comfort or aesthetics. They walked through the main room and up a staircase to the second floor. Yates knocked softly on a door at the end of the hall. "Emma, sweetheart, there is someone I would like you to meet." He opened the door slowly. The room was the only space in the house that showed any real warmth. A colorful quilt covered the small bed, and crude but cheerful drawings decorated the walls. By the window sat a small girl with long dark hair like her father's, holding a rag doll and staring out at the ranch yard. She did not turn when they entered. "Emma, this is Miss Townsend. She might be coming to stay with us, to keep you company and help around the house." Yates's voice gentled when speaking to his daughter, a tenderness that made Felicity's heart ache. Felicity moved slowly into the room, not approaching the child directly but instead examining the drawings on the wall. "These are quite beautiful," she said softly. "Is that a horse? I have always loved horses, though I confess I am not as skilled a rider as I would like to be." Emma did not respond, but Felicity noticed the girl's shoulders had tensed slightly, indicating she was at least listening. "My father once took me to see wild horses in the hills when I was about your age," Felicity continued, keeping her voice gentle and conversational. "There was a white mare leading the herd, and she was the most magnificent creature I had ever seen. I wanted desperately to keep her, but my father explained that some things are too wild and free to be kept, that we could only appreciate them for the brief moment they allowed us to share their world." She saw Emma's head tilt slightly, still not turning but clearly paying attention now. Yates watched from the doorway, his expression unreadable. After a few more minutes of Felicity speaking quietly about nothing in particular, just gentle stories and observations, he gestured for her to follow him back downstairs. In the kitchen, he poured 2 cups of coffee from a pot on the stove and handed her one. "She listened to you. That is more than she does for most folks. The last 3 women who came, she would not even stay in the same room with them." "There have been others?" Felicity asked, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. A few. They took one look at Emma at this place and decided it was not what they wanted. Cannot say I blame them. This is not an easy life, and Emma is not an easy child to care for, though God knows she is good and sweet when you get to know her. He paused, looking down into his coffee. I need to be honest with you, Miss Townsend. I did not place that advertisement looking for just a housekeeper or a nanny. I was looking for a wife. Felicity nearly dropped her cup. I beg your pardon. I know how it sounds, Yates said quickly, setting his own cup down and facing her directly. I am not looking for romance or any such nonsense. Emma needs a mother, someone permanent who will not leave when things get difficult. The ranch needs a woman's hand, and I need help I can count on. I am proposing a marriage of convenience, nothing more. Separate rooms, of course, a business arrangement that would benefit us both. You would have security, a home, a good name, and I would have help with Emma and the household. The room seemed to spin slightly as Felicity processed this information. It was highly irregular, even scandalous, yet she understood the practical reasoning behind it. A housekeeper could leave at any time, but a wife was bound by law and social convention. For a man with a daughter in need of stability, it made a certain desperate sense. You do not even know me, she said finally. I could be anyone, have any sort of character. You are educated, well-spoken, and you were gentle with my daughter. You came all the way out here on the strength of a simple advertisement, which tells me you are either desperate or brave, maybe both. I am desperate myself, Miss Townsend, and I think maybe two desperate people can help each other. Felicity walked to the window, looking out at the ranch yard. One of the hands was leading a string of horses toward the barn, and the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold. She thought of the boarding house, of her dwindling funds, of the limited and unappealing options available to a single woman of no means. She thought of Emma, silent and sad upstairs, and of Yates Barlow with his weary eyes and obvious devotion to his child. I would need time to prepare myself, to settle my affairs in town, she said slowly. And I would want it understood that, while I would fulfill all duties expected of a ranch wife in terms of household management and caring for Emma, the arrangement would remain purely business unless both parties agreed otherwise in the future. She heard him move closer, stopping a respectful distance behind her. That is more than fair. Would a week be enough time? I could arrange for Reverend Matthews to come out from town. A week, Felicity agreed, turning to face him. She extended her hand formally. Then we have an arrangement, Mr. Barlow. His hand engulfed hers, warm and calloused from hard work. Yates, if you are going to be my wife, even in name only, you should call me Yates. Felicity, she replied, and for just a moment, she saw something in his eyes that was not weariness or desperation, but perhaps the faintest glimmer of hope. The week passed in a blur of activity. Felicity settled her few debts, sold what belongings she could not take with her, and informed Mrs. Henderson of her impending marriage. The landlady was shocked but somewhat impressed, having heard of the Winston Ranch and its relatively prosperous owner. You could do far worse, girl, Mrs. Henderson said as she helped Felicity pack her trunk. Yates Barlow is known as a fair man, honest in his dealings. That ranch has been in his family for near 20 years. His father started it, tough old codger he was, and Yates has built it up even more since taking over. The wife dying like that, though, that was a tragedy. Cancer, they said. Took near a year for her to pass, and she suffered something terrible toward the end. Felicity tried not to think too much about the woman she was replacing, the wife who had borne Yates's child and shared his life before illness stole her away. This was a business arrangement, she reminded herself. She was not trying to fill a dead woman's shoes, merely stepping into a role that needed filling. On the appointed day, Yates arrived in town with a wagon to collect her and her belongings. He looked uncomfortable in what was clearly his Sunday best, a dark suit that fit well but seemed constraining on his large frame. Felicity wore her only good dress, a simple gray silk that had been her mother's, carefully preserved all these years. The ceremony at the small church was brief and matter-of-fact. Reverend Matthews, an elderly man with kind eyes, seemed to understand the nature of the arrangement without being told explicitly. There were no flowers, no music, no guests beyond Mrs. Henderson and one of Yates's ranch hands who served as witnesses. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Yates kissed her cheek chastely, his lips barely brushing her skin, and Felicity felt a confusing mixture of relief and something she could not quite name. Emma had stayed at the ranch with the housekeeper from a neighboring property, an older woman named Sarah who helped out occasionally. When they arrived back at the ranch in the late afternoon, Sarah was waiting on the porch with the little girl. She was good as gold, Sarah reported, gathering her shawl. Ate her lunch, did some drawing. You will do fine with her, Mrs. Barlow. The name startled Felicity, the reality of her new identity settling over her like an unfamiliar cloak. Emma watched from the doorway as Yates carried Felicity's trunk upstairs, her dark eyes following their movement with cautious interest. Felicity approached slowly, crouching down to the child's level. "Hello, Emma. I have come to stay, as your father mentioned. I hope we can be friends." She did not expect a response and did not receive one, but Emma did not retreat either, which felt like progress. That first evening was awkward as they navigated their new roles. Felicity prepared dinner from the supplies in the kitchen, finding it well stocked but disorganized. Yates and Emma ate quietly while Felicity served the meal, and afterward, Yates helped Emma prepare for bed while Felicity cleaned the kitchen. When Yates came back downstairs, he found Felicity standing at the window again, looking out at the darkening landscape. "Your room is across the hall from Emma's," he said. "I put your trunk in there. My room is downstairs, off the back of the house. If you need anything in the night, Emma sometimes has nightmares, just go to her. She will not make noise, but you will know. She sort of curls up real tight." "Thank you for telling me," Felicity said. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them until she finally spoke again. "This is strange for both of us, I imagine." "Strange does not begin to cover it," Yates admitted with a tired smile. "But I meant what I said about this being a help to us both. You will earn your place here. I do not doubt that, and I will make sure you have everything you need. We may not have a traditional marriage, but I will honor my vows to provide for you and treat you with respect." "As I will honor mine," Felicity replied. The days fell into a routine more quickly than Felicity had anticipated. She rose early to prepare breakfast for Yates and his ranch hands, learning the hearty fare that working men required. After Yates headed out to oversee the day's work, she would turn her attention to Emma, coaxing the silent child through lessons in reading and mathematics, teaching her to help with household tasks, and slowly, patiently, trying to reach the little girl beneath the wall of silence. Emma was intelligent and observant, communicating through nods and shakes of her head, through drawings and occasionally through printed words on her slate. She would smile sometimes, a shy curving of her lips that transformed her solemn little face, and those moments felt like victories to Felicity. In the afternoons, Felicity threw herself into transforming the house. She cleaned thoroughly, organized the chaotic pantry, mended curtains and linens, and gradually added small touches that made the place feel less like a waste station and more like a home. She planted herbs by the kitchen door and wildflowers in boxes on the porch railings. Yates noticed the changes, commenting occasionally with approval, but they maintained a careful distance from each other. Their conversations were polite and practical, discussing Emma's progress, the needs of the household, the business of the ranch. He was gone most days from dawn until supper, working alongside his men to manage the cattle operation and the extensive property. 2 weeks after their marriage, Felicity was in the kitchen making bread when she heard a commotion outside. Looking through the window, she saw Yates limping toward the house, supported by one of his hands. She rushed out to meet them. "Just a stupid mistake," Yates was saying through gritted teeth. "Horse spooked and I went into the fence wrong." Blood seeped through his trousers at the thigh, and his face was pale beneath his tan. Felicity immediately took charge, directing the ranch hand to help get Yates inside and onto the settee in the main room. "I need to see how bad it is," she said firmly, reaching for his belt. Yates grabbed her wrist, his face flushing. "I can manage," he protested. "Do not be ridiculous. I was not raised to be squeamish, and this needs proper attention. We can send for the doctor if necessary, but first I need to assess the damage." Her tone brooked no argument, the same voice she had used with recalcitrant students. Reluctantly, Yates allowed her to examine the wound. It was a deep gash but clean, caused by a sharp fence post from the look of it. Felicity worked efficiently, cleaning and binding it with practiced hands while Yates watched her with an expression she could not quite read. "Where did you learn to do this?" he asked as she tied off the bandage. "My father was something of a scholar but also a practical man. He believed in useful knowledge. He taught me basic medical care along with literature and mathematics." She stood, washing her hands in the basin. "You should rest for the remainder of the day. I will tell the men you will not be out this afternoon." "Felicity, I cannot just—" "You can and you will," she interrupted. "You employ capable men for a reason. Let them do their jobs while you recover, unless you want this to become infected and cause serious problems." A smile tugged at his lips, the first genuine one she had seen directed at her. "Yes, madam." She felt her cheeks warm and turned away to hide it, busying herself with tidying the medical supplies. "I will bring you something to eat. Emma will be down from her nap soon, and I am sure she will want to check on you." As she predicted, when Emma discovered her father was injured, she became agitated, hovering near him with worried eyes. Yates pulled her close with his good arm, murmuring reassurances, and Felicity felt something shift in her chest at the sight. Over the following days, as Yates recovered, Felicity found herself spending more time with him. She would bring him reports from the foreman, sit with him while he ate meals since he could not easily get to the table, and keep him company in the evenings. Their conversations deepened, moving beyond practical matters to more personal territories. He told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's stern but loving guidance, about meeting his first wife, Caroline, at a church social when he was 22. "She was delicate, refined," he said one evening, staring into the fire. "Oregon was too harsh for her, really. She tried, but she never quite adapted to the isolation, the hard work. When she got sick, part of me wondered if the land had just worn her down." "You should not think that way," Felicity said gently. "Illness does not discriminate based on where we live. It takes whom it will. Maybe." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You are different from her, stronger, I think, more suited to this life." "I am practical," Felicity replied. "And I have learned that survival often requires adapting to circumstances, rather than expecting circumstances to adapt to us." In turn, she told him about her unconventional upbringing, about a father who had defied social conventions to educate his daughter as he would a son. "He wanted me to be able to think for myself, to support myself if necessary. I suppose he succeeded, though perhaps not in the way he imagined. He would be proud of you, Yates said. Taking on a ready-made family, making this place better than it was, that takes courage. Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than was strictly proper, and Felicity felt her heart beat faster. She looked away first, disturbed by the feeling. By the time Yates was fully recovered and back to work, something had fundamentally shifted between them. The careful distance had diminished, replaced by an ease and familiarity that felt both comfortable and dangerous. Felicity caught herself watching for him to return in the evenings, found herself sharing small jokes with him, became aware of his physical presence in ways that made her breath catch. Emma was blossoming as well. While she still did not speak, she had become more animated, more willing to express herself through gestures and her slate. She followed Felicity everywhere, helping with chores, sitting close while Felicity read aloud in the evenings. One morning, Felicity woke to find Emma had crawled into bed beside her sometime in the night, curled trustingly against her side. The rush of protective love that filled her was overwhelming. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days of heat and hard work. The ranch hummed with activity, as cattle were moved to higher pastures and preparations made for the eventual drive to market. Felicity learned to manage the complex household, coordinating meals for the hands, maintaining the large garden that now flourished behind the house, preserving foods for winter. One particularly hot afternoon, she was in the kitchen making jam when Yates came in through the back door. He was dusty and sweaty from a day's work, his shirt sticking to his frame. He grabbed the water dipper from the bucket and drank deeply. "Where is Emma?" he asked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Napping upstairs. The heat wore her out." Felicity stirred the bubbling pot of berries, her own face flushed from the heat of the stove. Yates moved closer, looking into the pot. "Blackberry, wild strawberry. I found a patch near the creek." She was acutely aware of his proximity, of the smell of sun-warmed skin and leather, of the way his arm brushed hers as he reached past her for another dipper of water. "You are good at this," he said quietly. "All of this. Better than I dared hope when I placed that advertisement." Felicity set down her spoon and turned to face him, finding him closer than she expected. "I have found purpose here. Emma has given me that, and you have given me security, a home. I should be thanking you. Felicity." Her name on his lips sounded different than when others said it, rougher, warmer. "This arrangement of ours, I know we agreed to keep it strictly business, but I have to be honest with you. That is becoming increasingly difficult for me." Her heart hammered in her chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that somewhere along the way, you stopped being just Emma's caretaker or my business partner. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I think about you throughout the day. I enjoy our conversations, your laugh, the way you hum when you are working. I find myself wanting things I have no right to want from a marriage I entered into as a practical arrangement." Felicity swallowed hard, her own feelings rising to the surface despite her efforts to contain them. "Yates." A crash from upstairs interrupted her, followed by Emma's footsteps running across the floor above them. They both rushed toward the stairs, their conversation suspended in the urgency of the moment. Emma stood in the hallway outside her room, pointing frantically at the window. When they reached her, they could see smoke rising from one of the outbuildings near the barn. "The hay store," Yates said, already running. "Get Emma outside, away from the buildings, then ring the bell for the hands." Felicity did as instructed, keeping Emma close while pulling the cord that rang the large bell used to summon workers in emergencies. Within minutes, men came running from all directions, forming a bucket brigade from the well to the burning building. The fire was contained relatively quickly, The building soaked before the flames could spread to the more critical structures. When the danger had passed and the last embers extinguished, Yates gathered everyone to investigate the cause. It did not take long to discover the problem: a lantern that had been left burning near stacked hay, knocked over by rats or wind or simple carelessness. "This is my fault," one of the younger hands, a man named Thomas, admitted miserably. "I was in there at midday, looking for some rope. I must have left the lantern going." Yates's face was stern but not unkind. "You made a serious mistake that could have cost us the barn, maybe the house. But you owned up to it, and that counts for something. You will take on extra duties for the next month and be more careful from now on." "Understood. Yes, sir, Mr. Barlow. Thank you, sir." As the men dispersed, Felicity approached Yates. He was staring at the damaged building, his jaw tight with stress. "It could have been much worse," she said softly. "I know. If Emma had not seen it when she did, if you had not acted so quickly with the bell, we might have lost everything." He turned to her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "I could have lost you." "Yates," she said again, and this time nothing interrupted them as he stepped closer, his hands coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "I know I have no right," he said roughly. "I know this was supposed to be business, that you did not sign on for a real marriage. But God help me, Felicity, I am falling for you. I think maybe I have been since the day you walked onto this ranch and treated me like I had good sense, since you sat with Emma and told her about wild horses. I do not want separate rooms and polite distance anymore. I want a real marriage, a real life together, if you could ever want that too." Felicity felt tears prick her eyes, overwhelmed by the intensity of her own feelings rushing to the surface. "I did not expect this," she whispered. "I came here for survival, for security, telling myself that was enough. But you have made me feel things I never anticipated. I care for Emma as if she were my own daughter. And you, Yates Barlow, you have become far more than an employer or a husband in name only. Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile beginning to break through the uncertainty on his face. "That is a yes to figuring this out together, to seeing where these feelings lead. I will not lie and say I am not frightened. This was not what I planned." "Plans change," Yates said. And then he kissed her, really kissed her, and Felicity felt the world shift beneath her feet in the best possible way. His lips were warm and slightly chapped, moving against hers with a mixture of tenderness and barely restrained passion. Felicity kissed him back, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, feeling the solid strength of him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should probably not do this in front of the entire ranch crew," Yates said, glancing around at the men who were very obviously trying not to stare. Felicity laughed, a slightly giddy sound she barely recognized as her own. "Probably not." They walked back to the house together, and Felicity noticed Emma watching from the porch with what looked suspiciously like a smile on her small face. The little girl ran down the steps and hugged them both, her thin arms reaching as far as she could to encompass them together. That night, after Emma was asleep, Felicity and Yates sat on the porch in the cooling evening air. The stars were brilliant overhead, the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night surrounding them. "I want to do this properly," Yates said, taking her hand. "Court you the way I should have from the beginning if circumstances had been different. We are already married," Felicity pointed out with amusement. "That is why I said properly, not traditionally." He grinned at her. "We have done everything backwards, so why stop now? Let me take you to the social in town next week. Let me introduce you to people as my wife, the woman I am proud to have by my side. Let me show you off a little." "Show me off." "Yates, I am hardly. You are brilliant and beautiful and stronger than you give yourself credit for," he interrupted. "And I have wanted to do this for weeks now." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with deliberate slowness. "So please, Felicity, will you allow me to court you? As if I could refuse you anything when you look at me like that," she said softly. The social the following weekend was held in the community hall in Oregon City, a building that served multiple purposes for the growing town. Felicity wore her best dress, the gray silk she had worn for their wedding, but Yates insisted on buying her ribbons for her hair from the general store before they went in. "You do not need to spend money on such things," she protested, even as she accepted them, touched by the gesture. "I want to," he said simply. "Let me spoil you a little. God knows you have earned it, putting up with me and this rough life." Inside the hall, Felicity found herself introduced to what seemed like everyone in the county. The women were curious but mostly welcoming, having heard that Yates Barlow had finally remarried. Felicity fielded questions about how they met with carefully worded answers that were not quite lies, but did not reveal the full truth of their arrangement's beginning. Emma stayed close to Felicity throughout the evening, occasionally accepting small cakes or sweets from kind matrons but never speaking. Felicity noticed some of the other children trying to engage Emma in play, but the little girl remained reserved, content to observe from the safety of Felicity's side. When the musicians struck up a waltz, Yates bowed formally before Felicity. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Barlow?" "I should warn you, I am not very practiced," Felicity said, but she took his hand and allowed him to lead her to the floor. She need not have worried. Yates was a strong leader, guiding her through the steps with confidence. Held in his arms, moving to the music, Felicity felt something settle into place inside her chest, a sense of rightness she had not known she was missing. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, looking down at her. "That I am glad I answered your advertisement," she admitted. "That despite the unusual circumstances, I think perhaps this is exactly where I was meant to end up." His arms tightened around her just slightly. "I think perhaps you are right." They were nearly at the end of the dance when Felicity noticed a woman watching them from the edge of the floor. She was probably in her 40s, well-dressed, with a stern expression that seemed to be focused specifically on them. "Who is that?" Felicity asked quietly. Yates glanced in the direction she indicated, and his expression shuddered slightly. "Martha Cunningham." She was Caroline's aunt, Emma's great-aunt. She has made it clear she thinks I am not raising Emma properly, that the girl needs a firmer hand and more refined surroundings. "Has she tried to take Emma from you?" Felicity asked, alarm shooting through her. "She has suggested it more than once." "The law favors fathers, fortunately, but she has influence in town and she has made things difficult at times." He paused as the music ended. "I should introduce you. Better to face it head-on than let her gossip." They approached Martha Cunningham with Emma between them, the little girl's hand tight in Felicity's. The older woman's sharp eyes assessed Felicity thoroughly. "So this is the new Mrs. Barlow," Martha said, her tone suggesting she found Felicity lacking even before any proper introduction. "Rather hasty, was it not, Yates? Caroline has been gone barely 2 years." "Mrs. Cunningham," Yates said evenly. "This is my wife, Felicity. Felicity, this is Martha Cunningham, Caroline's aunt." "A pleasure to meet you," Felicity said politely, though the woman's hostility was palpable. "I understand you were a schoolteacher," Martha continued, ignoring Felicity's greeting. "How fortuitous that you should find employment in such a fashion, though one wonders what sort of woman answers an advertisement for a wife rather than seeking a proper courtship." Before Felicity could respond, Emma suddenly moved, placing herself directly in front of Felicity in a protective stance. The little girl's face was stormy, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides, Martha's eyebrows rose. Well, it seems the child has taken to her new mother. Though one must consider whether that is necessarily a positive thing, given that Emma still refuses to speak. Perhaps she requires more discipline than affection. Emma requires love and patience, Felicity said firmly, finding her voice. She has suffered a terrible loss, one that deserves compassion, not harsh judgment. I am honored to be her stepmother, and I will continue to provide her with the supportive environment she needs to heal in her own time. Spoken like someone with no actual experience raising children, Martha said dismissively. Mark my words, coddling that girl will not help her. She needs structure, needs to be in town where she can attend proper school and receive appropriate guidance. She is receiving excellent education, Yates interjected, his voice hard now. Felicity was a teacher, as you noted, and Emma is thriving under her care. Emma is my daughter, Mrs. Cunningham, and she will remain with me where she belongs. Now, if you will excuse us, we were just going to get some refreshments. He guided Felicity and Emma away, his hand tense on the small of Felicity's back. Outside, in the cooler air away from the crowded hall, they all took deep breaths. I apologize for that, Yates said. Martha has always been difficult, but she has gotten worse since Caroline died. She blames me somehow, thinks if Caroline had stayed in a city with better doctors things might have been different. Does she have any legal standing to pursue custody? Felicity asked, still feeling protective anger on Emma's behalf. No. The law is clear that Emma stays with me, but Martha is a prominent figure in the community and her opinions carry weight. She could make things difficult socially, though honestly, I do not care much about that. Emma tugged on Felicity's sleeve, and when Felicity looked down, the little girl was pointing back toward the hall and shaking her head firmly. You do not want to go back inside? Felicity asked. Emma nodded. All right, sweetheart, we can go home if you prefer. But Emma shook her head again, this time pointing at all three of them and then making a hugging gesture. Felicity felt her throat tighten with emotion. You want us all together? Emma nodded vigorously, then leaned against Felicity's side. Yates crouched down in front of his daughter. Emma, honey, we are all together. Felicity is not going anywhere, I promise you. We are a family now. The little girl looked between them, then did something surprising. She took both of their hands and placed them together, holding them there with both of her own small ones. The message was clear. I think she is giving us her blessing, Felicity said softly, tears pricking her eyes. I think you are right, Yates agreed, his own voice rough with emotion. They decided to return home rather than re-enter the social, the evening having been eventful enough. On the ride back to the ranch, Emma fell asleep between them, her head resting on Felicity's shoulder. The contentment Felicity felt was almost overwhelming, this sense of belonging that she had never expected to find. Thank you, Yates said quietly, keeping his voice low so as not to wake Emma. For what? For standing up to Martha, for caring about Emma so fiercely, for taking a chance on a desperate rancher and his silent daughter. He paused. For becoming part of this family for real, not just in name. I think the three of us were meant to find each other, Felicity replied. Strange as the path was that brought us together. When they arrived home, Yates carried Emma upstairs while Felicity prepared the house for night. But when she went to retire to her own room as had been their habit, Yates caught her hand in the hallway. Stay with me, he said simply. If you are willing. No more separate rooms, not unless that is what you want. Felicity's heart raced, but she knew her answer. That is not what I want, not anymore. He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other pulled her close against him. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. I know it is fast. I know we barely started courting properly, but I cannot hold it in anymore. I love you, Felicity." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I did not mean to fall so hard, but here we are." "Here we are," he agreed, and led her to his room, closing the door softly behind them. The night that followed was everything their wedding night should have been, tender and passionate and right. Yates was gentle with her, taking his time, making sure she felt cherished and desired. Afterward, lying in his arms in the darkness, Felicity felt a peace she had never known before. "No regrets?" Yates asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Not a single one." The following months passed in a blur of happiness that Felicity had never imagined possible. The initial practical arrangement had transformed into a genuine marriage, built on growing love and mutual respect. Yates was an attentive husband, finding small ways to show his affection throughout each day. A wildflower left on her pillow, a stolen kiss in the kitchen, his hand finding hers under the dinner table. Emma continued to thrive, becoming more expressive and affectionate even as she remained mute. She had taken to following Felicity through her daily tasks, learning everything she could about running a household. The little girl also showed a natural talent for drawing, and Felicity encouraged this, providing her with better paper and pencils when they went to town. It was on one such trip to Oregon City, in the late fall, that they encountered Martha Cunningham again, this time outside the general store. The older woman's expression was calculating as she took in the sight of them, Yates and Felicity walking together while Emma held both their hands, clearly a united family. "Mrs. Barlow," Martha said coolly. "And Emma, I trust you are well." "We are all quite well, thank you," Felicity replied politely but distantly. "I have been meaning to visit the ranch," Martha continued, "to see for myself how Emma is progressing. As her only living family besides her father, I have a responsibility to ensure her welfare." "Emma is progressing wonderfully," Yates said firmly. "And you are welcome to visit, though I would appreciate advance notice. We are quite busy with ranch work." "Of course. I shall send word." Martha's gaze fixed on Emma, who had moved to hide partially behind Felicity's skirts. "Still not speaking, I see. Such a shame. A proper doctor might be able to help, not these frontier physicians who barely know their trade." "Emma speaks when she is ready to speak," Felicity said, her tone sharper than intended. "She has been through trauma and she is healing at her own pace. Forcing her would only cause more harm. You have been her stepmother for what, 4 months, and you presume to know better than family who has known her since birth." Martha's voice carried an edge now. "I wonder what the court might think about a child being raised in such an isolated environment by a woman with no real maternal experience." "Are you threatening to pursue custody?" Yates asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I am expressing concern for my great-niece's welfare." "Surely any reasonable person would understand that." Martha gathered her skirts. "Good day to you all. Do expect me at the ranch within the week." As she walked away, Felicity felt Emma trembling against her leg. She crouched down, gathering the little girl into her arms. "She cannot take you away, sweetheart. I promise you that. You are home with us, and that is where you will stay." Emma clung to her tightly, and Felicity felt the dampness of tears against her neck. Her heart ached for the child's fear. "We should speak to a lawyer," Yates said grimly. "Make sure everything is legal and clear. I will not have Martha frightening Emma or threatening our family." They cut their shopping trip short and headed directly to the office of Samuel Morrison, the town's lawyer. Morrison listened carefully to their concerns, taking notes and occasionally nodding. The law heavily favors paternal custody, especially when the father is of good character and financial stability, which you clearly are, Mr. Barlow, Morrison said. "However, Mrs. Cunningham could potentially make a case based on the child's well-being, particularly if she could demonstrate that Emma is not receiving adequate care or education. "She is receiving excellent care," Felicity said emphatically. "I was a teacher, as I mentioned, and Emma's education is far more comprehensive than what she would receive in the town school. She is loved and safe and thriving, even if she does not speak. The mutism could be a concern if Mrs. Cunningham presents it as evidence of psychological distress," Morrison warned. "Do you have any documentation from a physician regarding Emma's condition?" "Dr. Peterson examined her about 6 months ago, before Felicity and I married," Yates said. "He found no physical cause for her silence and said it was likely emotional, that time and stability would help." "Get a recent examination and assessment," Morrison advised. "Document Emma's progress in her studies. Gather testimony from neighbors and community members about her well-being. Build a clear case that she is thriving in her current home, and I would recommend that you both be present when Mrs. Cunningham visits, with witnesses if possible." They left the lawyer's office sobered but determined. Over the next few days, they arranged for Dr. Peterson to come to the ranch to examine Emma again. The kindly physician spent time with the little girl, observing her interactions with Yates and Felicity, reviewing the schoolwork Felicity had saved, and asking gentle questions that Emma answered through nods, shakes, and her slate. "This child is healthy and happy," Dr. Peterson declared as he prepared to leave. "Her mutism persists, yes, but she has developed excellent alternative methods of communication. Her cognitive and physical development are age-appropriate, and the emotional bond with both of you is evident and strong. I see no cause for concern whatsoever, and I will state as much in my written report." "Thank you, Doctor," Felicity said, relief washing through her. Martha Cunningham arrived at the ranch 5 days later in an expensive carriage. Accompanied by a stern-looking man, she introduced as Mr. Whitmore, a child welfare advocate from Portland. Yates had arranged for Sarah, the neighboring rancher's wife, and Reverend Matthews to be present as witnesses. The visit was tense and formal. Martha and Mr. Whitmore inspected the house, questioned Felicity about Emma's daily routine and education, observed Emma's interactions with her family, and reviewed the materials from Dr. Peterson. Emma herself was the strongest argument for her continued placement with Yates and Felicity. Though she remained silent, she was clearly comfortable and happy, showing them her drawings, demonstrating her reading ability, and staying close to Felicity throughout the inspection. "The child is overly attached to her stepmother," Martha observed critically. "That seems unhealthy, particularly given how recently they met. The child has found security and maternal affection," Reverend Matthews interjected gently. "That is hardly unhealthy. I have observed this family regularly since their marriage, and I can attest to the love and stability present in this home." After several hours, Martha and Mr. Whitmore retreated to the parlor for a private discussion, leaving the others waiting anxiously in the kitchen. When they finally emerged, Mr. Whitmore's expression was neutral but not unkind. "Mrs. Cunningham has expressed concerns about Emma's ongoing mutism and isolated living situation," he said. "However, having observed the child and reviewed the documentation, I see no cause to recommend a change in custody. Emma appears well cared for, appropriately educated, and emotionally secure. The mutism is unfortunate but not indicative of neglect or abuse. My report will reflect these findings." Martha's face was tight with displeasure. "This is not over," she said quietly to Yates. "That child deserves better than this rough life, better than a stepmother who knows nothing of our family. This child deserves love, which is what she has here." Yates replied evenly. "I understand you miss Caroline, Mrs. Cunningham. I miss her too, and I know you want what is best for Emma. But Emma is happy here, and she will remain here. You are welcome to visit, with advance notice and at reasonable times, but I will not tolerate you frightening her or trying to undermine her security." After they left, the relief in the house was palpable. Emma clung to Felicity for the rest of the day, and that night she had nightmares that had both Yates and Felicity sitting with her until dawn. "I hate that she frightened Emma like that," Felicity said as they sat beside the sleeping child's bed, speaking in whispers. "Her own great aunt, and she made her feel unsafe." "People do not always show love in healthy ways," Yates replied. "Martha is grieving her niece and perhaps projecting that grief onto Emma. That does not excuse it, but maybe it helps explain it. You are generous to think so." "Not generous, just realistic. And honestly, I do not care about Martha's motivations. What matters is Emma, and Emma is staying right here with us." Winter came early that year, snow blanketing the ranch by mid-November. The work became harder but also more contained, with most efforts focused on caring for the animals and maintaining buildings, rather than the expansive summer work. The evenings grew longer, and the three of them spent much time together by the fire, reading or playing quiet games or simply enjoying each other's company. It was during one of these peaceful evenings, a few days before Christmas, that something remarkable happened. Felicity was reading aloud from a book of fairy tales. Emma curled against her side and Yates in his chair nearby, when she came to a passage about a princess who had lost her voice. But the princess discovered that she did not need spoken words to express her love, Felicity read. "For love speaks in gestures and glances, in presence and patience, in all the small ways we care for one another." "Like you," Emma said. Felicity stopped reading, certain she had misheard. Yates sat bolt upright in his chair. "Like you," Emma repeated, her voice rusty from disuse but clear. "You love me even though I do not talk." Tears sprang immediately to Felicity's eyes as she pulled Emma into a tight embrace. "Oh, sweetheart, yes, I love you so much, whether you speak or not." Yates was across the room in an instant, gathering both of them into his arms. "Emma, honey, your voice. We missed it so much." "I know," Emma said, and she was crying too now. "I wanted to talk, but the words got stuck after Mama died, but Felicity made them unstuck. She made everything better." The three of them held each other, crying and laughing simultaneously, overwhelmed by the breakthrough. When the initial emotion subsided, Emma began talking more, haltingly at first and then with increasing confidence, as if a dam had broken. She talked about her mother, about the fear of forgetting her, about the loneliness before Felicity came. "I was scared if I talked about Mama, I would lose her completely," Emma said. "But Felicity tells me stories about losing her Mama and Papa, and she remembers them. So I can remember Mama too and still have a new Mama." "Right, absolutely right," Felicity said, smoothing Emma's hair. "You can love your Mama Caroline and love me too. Love does not run out or replace itself. It just grows." That Christmas was the most joyful Felicity could remember. Emma chattered constantly, making up for 2 years of silence, and her personality emerged fully. She was bright, funny, curious, and affectionate, qualities that had been there all along but could now express themselves fully. Martha Cunningham sent a stiff note along with a Christmas gift for Emma, acknowledging that she would cease her custody efforts given the child's improved condition, but maintaining that she still had reservations about the arrangement. Yates wrote back politely, thanking her for the gift and inviting her to visit in the spring if she wished. The olive branch was tentative but sincere. As winter turned to spring, Felicity discovered she was pregnant. The realization came with a mixture of joy and trepidation. She wanted this child desperately, but she worried about how Emma would react to no longer being the sole focus of attention. She told Yates first, finding him in the barn one afternoon. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for, immediate joy and excitement tempered by concern for her well-being. "A baby," he said wonderingly, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our child. Felicity, I could not be happier. You are certain?" "I know we did not discuss this possibility, and things are so good with Emma now. I do not want her to feel displaced." "Emma is going to be thrilled," Yates assured her. "She has been talking about wanting a little brother or sister since she started speaking again. She will be a wonderful big sister." He was right. When they told Emma that evening, the little girl's excitement was boundless. She immediately began making plans for the baby, drawing pictures of what she thought it would look like, suggesting names, and asking endless questions about when it would arrive and what it would need. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and into summer. Felicity continued her work around the ranch with some modifications, accepting help more readily and taking time to rest when needed. Yates was attentively protective without being overbearing, and Emma appointed herself as Felicity's primary assistant and guardian. In late August, on a sweltering afternoon, Felicity's labor began. Sarah came to stay with Emma while Yates rode for Dr. Peterson. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, but finally, as the sun was setting, a healthy baby boy made his entrance into the world. "You have a son," Dr. Peterson announced, placing the squalling infant on Felicity's chest. Yates had tears streaming down his face as he looked at his newborn son, then at Felicity. "You are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for this, for everything." They named him James after Felicity's father, and he was perfect, tiny and red-faced and beautiful. Emma was allowed in shortly after, tiptoeing reverently to peer at her new brother. "He is so small," she whispered in awe. "Can I hold him?" Felicity showed her how to support the baby's head, and Emma sat frozen, scarcely breathing as she held James for the first time. "I promise to be the best big sister ever," she told him solemnly. "I will teach you everything I know." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a good baby, generally content but demanding in the way all infants are. Felicity sometimes felt pulled in too many directions, trying to care for the baby while not neglecting Emma and maintaining the household. But she was never alone in the effort. Yates helped whenever he could, walking James when he fussed, taking Emma on special outings so Felicity could rest, and continuing to show his love and appreciation for his wife in countless ways. Emma proved to be a devoted big sister, always wanting to help with the baby. She would sing to him, bring him toys, and report importantly to Felicity whenever he made a new sound or movement. The bond between the siblings was evident from the start. One evening, when James was about 4 months old, Felicity stood in the doorway of the children's room, watching Emma read aloud to the baby from a picture book. James, lying on his blanket, seemed to be listening intently, his dark eyes fixed on his sister's face. Yates came up behind Felicity, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly. "I am thinking about how strange life is," Felicity replied. "A little over a year ago, I was alone and desperate, answering an advertisement for what I thought would be a practical arrangement. Now look at us. A family. A real, complete, loving family. Best decision I ever made placing that advertisement," Yates said. "Well, second best. The first best was falling in love with you." She turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, so much more than I knew I could love someone. I love you too. You took a desperate rancher and his silent daughter and made us whole again, made us better than we were before." They kissed softly, a gentle affirmation of their love before joining Emma and James in the nursery. Emma looked up at them with a brilliant smile. "James smiled at me," she announced proudly. "A real smile, not just gas like you said." "I am sure he did," Felicity said, settling beside her on the floor, "because he loves his big sister very much." Yates sat down with them, creating a small circle of family around the baby. James cooed happily, his small fists waving in the air, and Emma reached out to let him grasp her finger. The following spring brought Martha Cunningham for her promised visit, but the dynamic had shifted considerably. She was softer somehow, perhaps worn down by time or moved by the evident happiness of the family. She spent time with Emma, listening as the girl chattered about her lessons, her drawing, her baby brother. She held James and even complimented Felicity on the household. Before she left, Martha spoke privately with Yates and Felicity. "I owe you both an apology," she said stiffly. "I was grieving and angry, and I took it out on you. I thought no one could care for Emma the way Caroline would have, but I can see that she is loved and thriving. And I can see that you have given her a real family, not just a father trying his best alone." "Thank you for saying that," Yates replied. "And you are welcome here, Martha. Emma should know her great-aunt, hear stories about her mother. We want that for her." Martha nodded, blinking back tears. "She looks so much like Caroline sometimes." "But she has your strength, Yates, and I think perhaps she has Felicity's kind heart." After she departed, the ranch settled into its rhythms again. The years passed with the steady progression of seasons, each bringing its own challenges and joys. Emma grew into a confident, articulate young woman, her early trauma transformed into empathy and strength. James became a lively, adventurous boy who followed his father everywhere, already showing signs of becoming a capable rancher. When Emma turned 18, she announced plans to attend the new teachers' college in Salem, wanting to follow in Felicity's footsteps. Felicity helped her prepare, proud and heartbroken in equal measure to see her stepdaughter ready to fly. "You gave me this," Emma said as they packed her trunk. "You showed me that education matters, that I could do anything I set my mind to. I want to help other children the way you helped me. You were never broken, Emma. You just needed time and love to heal." "I needed you," Emma corrected, hugging her tightly. "You and Papa and this family. I needed to know I was safe enough to find my voice again." By the time James was 10, Felicity discovered she was pregnant again. A surprise, but a welcome one. This time she gave birth to twin girls, delivered with less difficulty than James had been. They named them Catherine and Rose, and the house rang with new noise and chaos. Emma came home from college to meet her new sisters, and the sight of her holding the twins, cooing over them with the same devotion she had shown James, made Felicity's heart full to bursting. Yates, now in his 40s with silver threading his dark hair, watched his expanded family with obvious contentment. "You know, when I placed that advertisement all those years ago, I just wanted help with Emma. I never imagined I would end up with this, with all of you, with so much happiness." "Are you complaining?" Felicity teased, rocking one of the twins. "Not even a little bit, just marveling at how blessed I am." He leaned over to kiss her forehead. "How blessed we all are." The years continued their steady march. Emma graduated from Teachers College and took a position at the school in Oregon City, eventually marrying a young lawyer named David Harrison. They built a house on a corner of the Winston Ranch, staying close to family while building their own life. James, as predicted, took to ranching like he was born to it, working alongside his father and learning every aspect of the business. The twins, Catherine and Rose, proved to be as different as night and day despite being identical in appearance. Catherine was quiet and studious, while Rose was outgoing and adventurous. They kept the household lively and challenged Felicity's skills as a mother in new ways. One autumn evening, when the twins were about 8 years old, the whole extended family gathered at the ranch house for Sunday dinner. Emma and David were there with their 2-year-old son, Thomas. The table was crowded and loud, full of conversation and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family. Felicity looked around at all of them, her heart swelling with gratitude. Yates caught her eye from across the table and smiled, that special smile he reserved only for her, the one that still made her pulse quicken even after all these years. Later, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, they sat together on the porch in the cool evening air, much as they had on so many nights over the years. You ever think about what your life would have been if you had not answered that advertisement? Yates asked, his arm around her shoulders. Sometimes, Felicity admitted, but I cannot imagine it really. This life, this family, it feels like the only path I was ever meant to walk. Even though I came here out of desperation, even though we started as a business arrangement, this is where I belong. I think about it too, Yates said. I think about how close I came to losing everything, to letting grief and hardship defeat me. I needed help with Emma, but I ended up with so much more. I ended up with you, with love, with a life fuller and richer than I ever dreamed possible. We found each other at exactly the right time, Felicity said. Two desperate people reaching out, not knowing they were reaching for each other. And we built something beautiful, Yates added. He turned her face toward his and kissed her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown that first day when he told her he was falling for her. I love you, Felicity Barlow, more today than yesterday and not as much as tomorrow. I love you too, Yates, always and forever. They sat together under the stars, two people who had found each other through unconventional means and built an extraordinary life together. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving, full of family and love and possibility. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and protected. As Felicity leaned against her husband's shoulder, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, she felt complete satisfaction with her life. She had come to this place seeking survival and security, never imagining she would find love, purpose, and a family that filled her heart to overflowing. The arrangement that had begun as a desperate solution to both their problems had transformed into the greatest blessing of both their lives. The stars wheeled overhead, bright and eternal, and somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, its cry answered by another. Life on the ranch continued its endless cycle of seasons and work and celebration. And through it all, the love that had grown between Yates and Felicity remained constant, the foundation upon which they had built everything else. Years later, when they were old and gray, surrounded by children and grandchildren, they would tell the story of how they met, how a simple advertisement in a newspaper had brought them together. The younger ones would marvel at the unconventional beginning, but Emma, their first child in all the ways that mattered, would always smile knowingly. It was not the advertisement that brought you together, she would say. It was love waiting to happen, two hearts ready to heal each other. The advertisement was just the excuse, and she would be right, because while Yates had needed a wife for his daughter's sake, he had fallen harder than he ever thought possible for the remarkable woman who answered his call. And Felicity, who had come seeking security and employment, had found a love story beyond anything she could have imagined, a partnership built on respect and deepened into devotion, a family forged from necessity and strengthened by choice. Their legacy lived on in the ranch that continued to thrive, in the children and grandchildren who carried their values forward, in the story of two people who had the courage to take a chance on an unconventional arrangement, and the wisdom to recognize love when it grew between them. The Winston Ranch stood as a testament to what could be built when two people committed to caring for each other, to working together, to believing that family could be chosen as well as born. As Felicity approached the end of her long and happy life, she often thought back to that desperate moment when she had read the advertisement, when she had been alone and frightened and unsure of her future. She could not have known then that she was about to embark on the greatest adventure of her life, that the practical arrangement she was considering would transform into the deepest love she had ever known. Yates passed away first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and Felicity followed him just 6 months later, unable to bear being without her other half for long. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under trees that Yates had planted the year they married. A simple stone marking their resting place with names and dates, and the word that best described what they had built together: forever. And the ranch continued on, passed down through generations, each one adding their own stories while honoring the legacy of the couple who had started it all. The rancher who had needed a wife and the woman who had needed a home, both of them finding far more than they had sought. Both of them blessed beyond measure by the choice to answer a simple advertisement that had changed everything.